Well, good morning. How are you all today? I hope you're well. Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm going to make two kind of shorter videos today. The first one here is going to be on my take on that movie Civil War, and the second one is going to be it's going to ask you a question actually, and that is, are you really preparing to live, or are you just waiting to die? And that's been on my mind for a while because of so many comments that I see, not necessarily on this channel, but on other channels. And it makes all the difference, and I hope you'll watch that one too. So yesterday I finally went and saw that movie Civil War, and I took my wife with me, Kelly, because I wanted to see her reaction. Now it was interesting because and you know I've heard people give good reviews and bad reviews. This isn't necessarily going to be a review in that I'm going to try not to put in any spoilers. I'm not going to tell you the story. Well, I'm going to tell you the basic story, but I'm not going to get into details. But I'm going to give you my take on the movie as a whole and a couple of lessons that I think you might want to take out of it. But anyway, so we went, and Kelly didn't know anything about it, and I think that's important. And I didn't really tell her anything about it because I wanted to see what effect it had on the person who wasn't keeping up on all of the things necessarily that all of us do. Preparedness is not her primary focus or interest. She spends, she bears all of the burden of family scheduling. We have 3 kids, who are involved in, you can't believe how many activities, and then she's involved, like, she's a line judge when Morgan plays her volleyball. She's involved in all sorts of groups and organizations. She's going to be in charge of the spirit wear for the high school next year. She just does everything besides taking care of everything around the house. And so she doesn't have time to keep up with this. She is aware of and very helpful in the preparedness way, and thinks exactly like I do politically, and probably like most of you do. We're concerned with the collapse of society. It's just not her strength. That's a way of me explaining that she's not clueless. She just doesn't keep up daily on this stuff, which I thought was important. Well, we watched the movie, and we came out, and I asked her, I said, what did you think? She said, I thought that was stupid. And I said, really? Well, I thought it was pretty good. Matter of fact, there were parts of it that I thought were brilliant. Well, she didn't see it that way, and as we got to talk a little bit more, I saw her side, she saw my side, a little bit. But the thing is, when you keep up on this stuff every day, you're going to see it differently than someone who doesn't. And I think that's an important difference to keep in mind. How does it? Who is this movie playing to, and how are they taking it? So, is this going to necessarily? Let's see. What should it have? Bring any into the fold that weren't already in the fold, which I think it could have been one of its greatest purposes. And to that, I would say no. Probably not going to. The storyline was a bit disjointed, which I thought was good for those of us who keep track of these things. But this movie missed on a major opportunity of bringing people who weren't necessarily in tune with what's going on in this aspect into wanting to know more and saying, whoa, this could happen. What's going on here? So I think it missed out on that big time. Bigly. However, for those who do keep up on this, I think it had some important lessons in it. Now I'll just tick off a few of those. The story, as you may or may not know, was a story not necessarily of the Civil War. We don't know why it started. We don't know exactly who is involved. There's a few references on Texas and California having some kind of alliance there. It doesn't explain how that happened. Maybe it's because so many Californians have been moving to Texas, he thinks. And then there's a Western Alliance, which is pretty much the northern swath, and they call it the Western Alliance, or not the Western Alliance, Western Forces. Maybe it's called the Alliance, I don't remember. That are pretty much everything west of D.C. And then I think there's Florida and down in there. I didn't pay a lot of attention to that because it didn't. Those themes weren't developed during the movie. Anyway, the story is, as we see it through the eyes of a traveling news crew, kind of an independent crew apparently, of kind of a pieced together team. Of an experienced war correspondent and war photographer. And then they bring on, and they are very jaded. I don't remember the actors' names. I don't watch movies much, so I don't know who they are. They bring on an older man, very overweight, can't really function that well, but he's very smart. I mean, he's been there, done that, twice over. So has the correspondent and the photographers, and then through a situation that I won't even get involved in, a young wannabe war photographer, crisis photographer, latches on to them because the older photographer, who is a woman, is her hero, right? So we won't even get into that, how that happens. But the story is that they want to go. They see the collapse of the country. They think the big story. They know the big story, perhaps the last big story that's going to get on any kind of news, is going to be the attack on Washington D.C., the collapse of the Capitol, and they have this idea of interviewing the president, right, in his last moments. None of these things. The movie is full. Let me say this: the movie is full of situations that are unrealistic, extremely unrealistic. But I think that they were put in there as vehicles to bring out certain lessons. And in that way, I'm not really, for the most part, a fan of movies that aren't realistic. For instance, remember that movie, Amerigeddon, that could have been a great movie, but there were so many things in it that were unrealistic. It had a great story. But totally, it was horrible. It was an embarrassment. And so while I'm not usually for movies that aren't realistic, this one was just more a conglomeration of situations that brings out things to think about. Okay, I'm going to throw out a few here. And first off, to let you know, I do recommend that you see this if you haven't already. I do. Okay, I don't think my wife would, but I do. And even later on last night, I think she said she had looked up a few things about it, of people that were talking about the story. She said, "Oh, okay, I get it." This crew, they're running around. Well, the first thing I liked is they were in an excursion. And I love my excursion, right? If you've read my books, you know that Jim is always driving his excursion. And I put my excursion in my books for the specific purpose of saying, yeah, this is what I suggest. And you've heard me talk about, trucks, pickups versus SUVs, and I'm all about the SUVs. Not the smaller ones necessarily, but the excursions. And I have an excursion. I have an extended Yukon. And then we have other SUVs actually. So I'm all about that because of how useful they are. They're a rolling house, and the perfect vehicle for that kind of situation. Too bad they stopped making them. If you don't already have one, good luck trying to get one. But anyway, so one of the scenes is they come on a gas station trying to get gas. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that the young girl noticed something down around the corner, down in an old car wash, and she goes down there, and there's two guys hanging there by their wrists. Well, they've been beaten to a pulp, to within an inch of their life, because at first you think they might be dead until one of them moves. And they've been hanging there for 2 days, and they are bleeding. I mean, they're beat almost to death. And one of the old boys that was up at the gas station, and when they pull into the gas station, there's several guys there with rifles. They're all ready for trouble, right? And anyway, so now we're down the young girl, and then the older photographer followed her down there. See these guys hanging there, right? And they're hanging by their wrists, just bleeding all, they're still dripping blood. And this guy comes down, one of the guys that was up there at the, excuse me just a second. I had to scratch my nose. One of you all out there must be talking about me. So one of the guys, a younger guy from up there, comes down there and he says something about him. Says, "Yeah, they're looters, and we take care of looters." Okay, there's a lesson. But then he says, "I knew that guy. We went to school together. He didn't talk to me much back then. He sure wanted to talk to me now." That's a good lesson. That's a good thing about this movie. They don't throw the lessons into your face. You have to be able to see them. And in a collapse, we're always thinking about grid down, but in the eventuality of a civil war, something like that, or just a grid collapse, when there's no rule of law, old grievances will come back, and it's going to be on who has the power. It really is, a lot of the people who leave rude comments on YouTube videos, if they act the way in real life that they act behind the anonymity of their keyboard, they probably got people just waiting for them if everything comes down. But anyway, that's a good lesson. A lesson that came before that actually is when they're talking to this guy, this older guy, big overweight guy, when he's trying to get them to take him with them. He says, if Washington falls, because right now it's looking like a revolution, okay, looking like a revolution, but he says, if Washington falls, something to this, they're all going to be at each other's throats. And that's something that I've talked about before. People have this idea of either a revolution or a civil war. And if you'll track revolutions and civil wars in the past, you'll see that revolutions are often followed by civil wars. And that's because a revolution comes about as a result of a whole lot of people being dissatisfied with the central government. And I may put this on American Reversion too, because this has some good lessons there. So welcome for all of you on American Reversion. If you look at the Russian Revolution, okay, there was a lot of different groups that were involved in that, and the Bolsheviks were the ones that came out on top afterwards. They went through the revolution and then inter-group conflict, essentially civil wars. Who is going to run this new government? And I've said that before because this is what many people misunderstand about what they call our civil war. It wasn't a civil war. A revolution is the overthrow of a government, and of course what we had here was a secession. Nobody tried to overthrow the federal government in that war in the 1860s. And then a civil war is two or more groups fighting for control of the same government, which is what happened in the Russian Revolution and then the following conflicts. That's also not what happened here in the United States. It was nobody was fighting for control of the federal government. Okay, they just wanted to be left alone. And but that's how secessions then often result in an oppressive hand by the central forces, right? So we'll pick that up again. By the way, I'm going to tell a story on on the Reversion channel, American Reversion, is very interesting. It's not a story; it's a news item. You all might be interested in coming over and watching that if you're just on integrative preparedness. A wealthy segment of one city down in Baton Rouge got tired of all of their tax money being sucked up by the rest of Baton Rouge, and have now won the right to split off from the city and form their own city. And of course it's being called racist because they're taking all the tax money away, but they live in very nice areas, kind of like I do. And when you having all your tax money sucked out into areas that are just hellholes, you get tired of it. And so this may be the beginning of smaller secession movements. That'll be interesting, but I'll cover that more over on the American Reversion channel. So, and if you look at, say, the Irish Rebellion, okay, there was a revolution there, and then there was fighting between the different factions, still are. Okay, so very often revolutions, if they are successful, devolve into civil wars, and not necessarily just between two different groups, but more. So that was very wise. So they're going across the country doing a lot of stupid things, and then they come upon, as a result of one stupid thing, where a couple of them, they get split up into different groups, and a couple of them are taken by some forces we don't. This is the scene with the guy with the red glasses, that's so famous there. Well, they're dressed as military, but we find out that they're not really military, and this is one of those. You've probably all, whether you've seen the movie or not, you've seen the trailers where it says, well, what kind of Americans are you? Okay. And, then they're saying, well, one of them says, well, I'm from Missouri. And another says, I'm from Colorado. And another guy, I forget what he says. Another guy's from Hong Kong. And the guy says, that's China. And shoots him. And shoots another guy who's not his kind of American. Well, this is what, and it doesn't identify these guys as being anything. I think there's an implication there, but I'll leave that up to you to decide for yourself. But it is going to, in a collapse like this in a civil war. I mean, anybody who's been in a war zone knows, or anybody that knows much about war zones, all of a sudden you've got multiple power centers, right? Little warlords, big warlords, semi-government, whatever. First off, carving out and then protecting their own areas, and sometimes working with each other and sometimes working against each other. The complexity, I don't think, can be overrated. So they get to, we see the development of the character, some more than others. When they make it to a camp, the old guy gets shot, saving them from these people who shot a couple of their friends. And that's where you also see a scene of a mass grave. So the old guy gets shot. Well, he's bleeding out. They finally get to a camp of the Western forces, and the old guy dies. Okay. Well, while they're lifting him out of the excursion, putting him in a box, the war correspondent, who should be grizzled by now, and really, he doesn't play a really hard character, but he's been there, done that, and then he's able to see all this stuff going on around him. And then when the old guy dies, his friend dies, well, we just see him screaming and crying and screaming and crying and screaming and crying. I don't know whether this is a lesson the producers wanted to convey, but it is a lesson, and that is, it's easy to see mayhem all around you, and until it happens to you, meaning maybe not you're the one getting killed, but somebody that you care about, okay? And then people seem to lose it, and I mean rightfully so. You know, they do. That is the distinction between seeing it and experiencing it. And we see that being more developed in the rest of the film, to where these photographers are seeing everything through the lens and documenting it, because they say, you know, it's not their job to take sides or participate or anything like that. They are the great observers. And to me, and this is what I told Kelly, I think this is an indictment on most of society, in that they want to see the pictures of things but not the things. Okay, they want to be the observer of whatever, terrible things, whatever, but they don't want to be a part of it. They don't want it to happen to them. And then we see the older photojournalist, I think, and it doesn't say this, but maybe I'm just interjecting this from my own thoughts. I think she starts to see the emptiness of that. I think she starts to see the total, how in vain all of this is, all of this violence, all of this. And we see that while many started out with a good cause, it starts to consume, the situation starts to overshadow the cause, shall we say. And, you know, I mean, we can see this in combat, and we can see this in law enforcement, that very often people who set on that road for very noble reasons, all of a sudden it evolves or devolves into the action itself. They're no longer there for the first noble reason, but they've been caught up with the hatred or the adrenaline or what's happened to their friends or whatever like this, and then that replaces the original cause, and now we're just fighting to fight. So to kill the ones that we don't like, you know. And interestingly enough, the very last scene, and I won't tell you what it was, and as a matter of fact, the last scene that plays behind the credits, I think, brought the most powerful message. They finally the Western forces break into the White House. The president is still there for some unknown reason. That wouldn't happen, but they just needed to use this as a vehicle for the point they wanted to get across. And they get him after a big firefight. Another one of the group gets killed. I won't tell you who. And they get into the president, and this guy who the photojournalist, or the journalist, who is wanted to interview the president, that's the whole purpose of them going there, gets in and gets up in his face. Now the president's down on the ground, he's down on the floor, with all these Western forces over him pointing their weapons at him. And the journalist gets in there and says, what are your last words? You know, there's a big lesson there. And then the president's last words are very important. I won't tell you what they are. And then what happens after that, and the final scene, I think, brings it all together. So, let me know what you thought about it. Probably a lot of you have seen the movie. You may agree, disagree. That's okay. You know, in a review, everybody sees different things. And if you decide to go, if you haven't seen it and decide to go see it as a result of this, come back here and leave a comment on what you thought. I left a lot out. You know, I mean, I left most of it out because you can't describe a 2-hour movie, you know, like this when you're trying to expand on points. But worth watching, yeah. Worth watching for somebody who understands that we're not really talking about reality, but we're seeing situations that bring out lessons about reality. Okay. All right. Hey, I don't have my books to show you because we just shipped a whole bunch of orders out yesterday, and I've run out waiting for the next shipment in. But if I'll say this is brought to you as always by my books, the Stone Mott series. If you want to get them, the links are down below. You can get them from Amazon. That link is down below. Or you can order them directly from me. And more people are to order them directly from me. And I love that because I get to sign them. And then I get to put in a message. Then I get to have them mailed out. And I do get them to use more slowly than Amazon, just because of this very thing. I keep running out, and then I order more, and then people keep ordering. Thank you very much. I'm glad all of you are enjoying the series so much. And then I have to wait for them to come in. Then I get the next bunch out. Steve, why don't you just order more? Well, I keep trying, and people just keep buying more. So thank you all. I'm glad you're enjoying and learning from it. So I'm going to get off of here and make the next one. What I'm be talking about. Are you really preparing to live or just waiting to die? And then after that, I'm going to get back to writing because I'm almost done with book number 7. So you all have a good day. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow, and I'll probably talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.